Let me tell you about the night I came face to face with the Red Lady of Huntingdon College. I had heard the stories before, of course, every student had. Martha, the girl who always wore red, who died tragically, and whose spirit still roams Pratt Hall. But I didn't believe it. Not until it happened to me. It was late, and I was alone in the common area. The old building groaned under the weight of the wind outside. My roommates had gone to bed, but I stayed up, trying to finish a paper. That's when I heard the faint sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from the far end of the hallway. I called out, "Who's there?" But no one answered. I felt a chill creep up my neck as the footsteps grew louder. I turned toward the hallway and saw her, a woman in a long red dress, her dark hair framing a face that was pale as death. Her eyes were empty, like they were staring straight through me, but I could feel her sadness and anger radiating off her. She walked past me without a word, but just before disappearing around the corner, she stopped. Her head turned slowly, her gaze locking onto mine, and a cold wave of dread washed over me. The lights flickered and then she was gone. I didn't sleep that night, and to this day, I avoid walking those halls alone. I've always loved ghost stories, but I never thought I'd be part of one. Growing up near Carrollton, Alabama, I heard all about the infamous courthouse window. People said you could see the face of Henry Wells, a man who was lynched after being falsely accused of arson. I never believed it, until one rainy night. I was walking home from a friend's house when I passed by the courthouse. The storm had let up and the building stood eerily silent, its windows glinting in the moonlight. That's when I saw it. A face staring down at me from the top window. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, or a trick of the light. But as I moved closer, the face became clearer, eyes wide with fear, mouth open in a silent scream. I froze, unable to look away. The face seemed alive, like it was watching me. My heart was pounding, and then I heard a voice, low and mournful, whispering, "Help me." I turned and ran as fast as I could, but the feeling of being watched stayed with me. Later I found out that the window had been replaced multiple times, yet the face always reappears. It's as if Henry's spirit refuses to be silenced, his innocence forever etched into the glass. This happened a few years ago when some friends and I decided to visit the grave of Grancer Harrison. We'd heard the stories about his ghost, the old plantation owner who loved to dance and still does, even in death. It was supposed to be fun, a little thrill to scare ourselves, but we weren't prepared for what we found. We arrived at the cemetery around midnight. It was quiet, almost too quiet, and the air felt heavy, like it was pressing down on us. We stood by Grancer's grave, laughing nervously, when one of my friends dared me to knock on the tombstone. I hesitated, but eventually gave it a light tap. That's when it started. The sound of a fiddle, faint but unmistakable, drifted through the air. It was coming from nowhere and everywhere all at once. Then we heard the rhythmic stomping of feet, like people dancing on wooden floors. We shined our flashlights around, but there was nothing, just the grave and the dark woods around us. Suddenly I saw him. A shadowy figure, dressed in old-fashioned clothes, was dancing just a few feet away. His movements were slow, almost hypnotic, and his shoes struck the ground with an eerie precision. My friends bolted, but I was frozen, unable to look away. The figure turned toward me, and for a moment I could see his face, gaunt and smiling, his hollow eyes burning into mine. The music stopped, and he vanished. I don't know how long I stood there before my friends came back for me, but I haven't returned to that cemetery since. Some stories are just too strange to dismiss. They linger in the dark corners of Alabama's history, waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to encounter them. Think twice before you visit these places. You might not leave alone. This next story took place at the Drish House in Tuscaloosa, a grand, historic mansion with a reputation as one of the most haunted places in Alabama. I had heard rumors about it, strange lights in the tower, whispers in empty rooms, and the heavy presence of something unseen. I didn't believe it until I spent a night there. It was part of a local ghost tour. The guide took us through the house, sharing the tragic story of Dr. John Drish and his wife Sarah. Dr. Drish was said to be obsessed with fire, and after his death, his widow became consumed by grief. People say her spirit still waiting for the grand funeral fire that never got lit. We made our way to the tower, an infamous spot where phantom fires had been reported. The air was thick, almost suffocating as we climbed the narrow staircase. When we reached the top, I felt a sudden drop in temperature. Then, out of nowhere, the room filled with the smell of smoke, sharp and acrid. I looked around, but there was no sign of fire. Suddenly, the entire tower lit up in an orange glow. Flames seemed to rise from the walls, but there was no heat, only the overwhelming sensation of panic. I stumbled backward, my heart racing as a shadowy figure appeared in the corner. It was a woman, her face twisted in anguish, her hands clutching at the air as if reaching for something or someone. And just as quickly as it began, it was over. The room went dark, the smell of smoke disappeared, and the figure was gone. I'll never forget the sound of the voice, a low, guttural wail that seemed to echo in my ears long after I left the house. The last story I'll share is about Gainesville, a sprawling antebellum mansion in Demopolis. The house is beautiful, but there's a heaviness to it, a sense that something or someone is still there. The legend revolves around a housekeeper who came to care for the home after the owner's wife died. She was said to be incredibly devoted, running the house with precision. But after her death, strange things started happening. Visitors have reported hearing faint echoes coming from the empty basement. And I can tell you it's more than just a story. I was part of a historical tour when I decided to wander off on my own. I found myself in the music hall staring at the grand piano. It was silent at first, but as I stepped closer, the music began to play again. A soft, haunted melody. I froze, staring at the piano for all that was there. Then I felt a presence behind me. I turned slowly, and there she was. A woman in a gray dress stood at the edge of the room, her hands clasped tightly, her eyes fixed on the piano. She didn't seem angry or threatening, just sad. Before I could say anything, she faded away, but the melody lingered. I left the house that day feeling like I'd intruded on something private, something sacred. These are just a few of Alabama's ghost stories, tales of love, loss, and unfinished business. Whether you believe in the supernatural or not, one thing is certain: some spirits refuse to rest. And if you're brave enough to seek them out, be prepared, because they just might find